Coming up on Life, Part 2. Retire? Not on my life. We'll meet some inspiring individuals who are living their dreams by helping others. And later, a certified genius on finding meaning and adventure after the age of 50. Plus, how ping pong keeps a publishing legend forever young. All coming up on Life, Part 2.
Major funding for Life Part 2 was provided by the Atlantic Philanthropies, engaging many to improve the lives of and achieve health and economic security for older adults. And by MetLife Foundation, celebrating the wisdom, talent, and experience of older adults. MetLife Foundation proudly supports Life Part 2.
Welcome to Life, Part 2. I'm Robert Lipsyte. Many of us think that one day, maybe when I'm 64, I'll finally do something that gives meaning to my life and leaves the world a better place. Few people manage to turn their well-intentioned dreams into reality, and only a chosen few get a prestigious prize for their good work. One of the most prestigious is called the Purpose Prize, and we're about to meet two inspiring yet down-to-earth Purpose Prize winners. But first, a little background.
There are a lot of people who might think, oh my God, you're in your 60s, you better hurry because you'll be, with the drool cup on the front porch of the old folks' home by the time you're 75. I don't think so.
I don't find anything as exciting as truly making a difference with my life.
Each year, the Purpose Prize, sponsored by Civic Ventures, presents 5 $100,000 and 10 $10,000 awards, all to individuals over 60 who are taking on society's biggest challenges.
I've read a lot of the profiles of the other Purpose Prize recipients, and what sets me aside from them is that I've come to it from a personal history of mediocrity and failure. I've spent the last 7 or 8 years in and out of foreclosure, borrowing money for coffees in the morning, and doing a lot of hitchhiking. I was in Africa just to visit a friend who had a small problem, and I saw women shelling peanuts by hand, literally with bloody fingers. Peanuts were such a great crop for them. It was a great way to make money, but they needed some simple machine that they could shell these peanuts. I went home, I looked everywhere, and basically this machine didn't exist. The thing is going up and down, so I thought, well, I'll just invent this thing. Time to do these by hand.
Former film gaffer Jacques Brandis' invention, the Universal Nutsheller, cost $28, but it's revolutionizing farming in developing countries by cutting down on labor and keeping more money in farmers' hands.
You cannot have prosperity without efficiency. In Malawi, we got the peanut oil business so efficient that it's no longer making any sense to bring imported oil from China and India into Malawi because the local farmers are filling the need. That's the kind of efficiency that creates economic prosperity.
I hear your heart.
Hi. Hey, Lori. How are
Sharon
you?
Rohrbach's Nurses for Newborns provides home visits for babies and mothers in need of medical and social care.
I was a newborn nursery nurse in a local hospital. One of the big problems was seeing babies come back through the emergency room that were dying of preventable causes. And watching a mother hold her dying baby and knowing that myself as a nurse with the knowledge and expertise I had could have saved that baby.
Yes.
It does have cancerous cells in it.
Yes.
Okay.
That's why.
Life-threatening illnesses that can cost a baby his life don't actually show up until the baby's 72 hours old.
They can get rid of
In
it.
1989, insurance companies dropped the length of stay for mothers and babies, and they dropped that from 3 days, 4 days, down to 1 or 2 days. And I knew that I did not have the political or economic means of changing insurance companies' minds or hospitals' minds about what they were doing. And I felt that my best bet was to try to get a nurse with my same skills into the home of as many babies affected by early hospital discharge as I possibly could.
She had her 6-month immunizations?
Yeah.
3 sets of shots, right? Okay.
And where's her still?
We've been able to not only provide very humane, loving care to those in need, but we've been able to prove that it's cost effective. I can impact next generations of leaders. I can impact nurses that we're able to hire. I can impact our patients. So it's a very exciting time of life for me.
We're delighted to welcome our 2 Purpose Prize winners, Sharon Rohrbach and Jock Brandis. And here to help us make the leap from having a great idea to making it happen in the real world is Carol Vecchio, founder and executive director of the Centerpoint Institute for Life and Career Renewal in Seattle. Welcome all to Life Part 2. Sharon, you're a neonatal nurse, and suddenly now you're a nonprofit entrepreneur. But there was a moment, I mean, something happened. There was some turn. I guess what we all need to hear is, where did you get the confidence that you could make a difference?
Oh, I did not have the confidence that I could make the difference. No. I looked around and very carefully looked to see who could make a difference. And I didn't feel that there was any way of impacting insurance companies with a profit motive, and the shorter the length of stay, the higher the profit for the hospitals. And I simply couldn't find anybody else to make a difference. And the sight of one baby dying in his mother's arms and her tears running down her face, saying, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? And she didn't do anything wrong. Our healthcare system was doing something very wrong. And I finally just couldn't find anybody else and thought, why not me? And came back the answer, you don't have the education, you don't have any money, you have 4 kids, you're married to a blue-collar worker. So there were a million reasons not to do something about it.
Well, what pushed you? Were you angry? Did you have a religious experience? Something?
I had given my life to the Lord in about 1978 and said, use me. And here's this desperately wrong thing in our society going on, and it appeared to be an opportunity to step forward.
Well, Jock, you came in from a different, as I understand it, you were kind of hitting bottom.
Well, I think mine is an interesting situation because the temptation, I kind of screwed up my career. I got myself into a situation where I didn't promote myself far enough and fast enough, and my career sort of fizzled out. And I think the automatic response to that is, well, I'm now just going to go and get a job as a manager at Costco. I think that's what people would probably want to do.
Did you think of yourself as a loser? I mean,
yes, I did. You know, you try and make.
You were going to make do. You were going to compromise.
I was going to finally get it right. I was going to get myself a 9-to-5 job with benefits, and that was going to be the one I was going to do until I retired. And thank God I got rescued from that, because I would have been the most miserable assistant manager at Costco.
Yeah, but I mean, rescued is sounds, yes. Yet on the other hand, you know, you were a farm boy who worked with machinery and knew how to do stuff. In TV and the movies, you know, special effects, you were making things happen. So that was in there. You had kind of lost sight of your own possibilities. But Sharon, your rescue was of a different kind. Would you use that same term?
I don't know that I was rescued. I was really happy in that job, working as a neonatal nurse, and wanted to do that forever.
But this calling, I mean, you had heard something.
I felt like
why
I
did
was
it take so
definitely being
long?
called. I think as you get older, you gain a little bit of self-confidence, and you stop worrying about what will people think. And I think you just give up completely worrying about failure. And I had to get to the point in my life where I really didn't care if I failed. I thought it was worse to have never tried. And I don't think I was there prior to that.
And you were prepared for failure? Or
Yeah,
you didn't consider it?
Well, I refused to fail, actually, because, I just didn't borrow any money, kept nurses for newborns in my house for 2 years. So if you don't have bills that you can't pay and you haven't borrowed anything, it doesn't really matter how long that it takes you to succeed.
Carol, do you agree with the idea of confidence growing as you get older?
Yes, and it still can be very difficult. These transitions are not something that we just one day wake up and say, okay, I'm going to do this. And it didn't happen that way for either one of you. Something changed. And then there's another step that most people skip, which is, okay, I think I have this idea, this isn't working, I should just be able to go out and do it. But no, you have to step back. And you have to reconsider, so what is my vision around this?
I think people must see that moment all the time. People have opportunities all the time. But to recognize it, these guys recognized it.
And, essentially, you have to take a chance.
Yeah.
But I think what you were talking about, confidence, the part that can get missed here is that I talk to other people about second careers and careers after retirement, and they break themselves into two groups of people. The people who need a second career, they need it because their savings aren't enough, or they're going to be living longer, or whatever. They're forced into a second career. And they're the other ones who seem to be more smug and self-satisfied, who have planned very well, but they've retired, and now they're looking at 30 years and they want to do something. And the assumption is that these people have to make radically different decisions. That the person who's forced into a second career has to start thinking about being a greeter at Walmart, while this other person who's come out of a series of successes and is financially stable has the luxury of making a better, happier, more self-fulfilling decision. I say that the same decision process can happen for both of these people. Just because you kind of weren't all that good in your first career doesn't mean you just have to say, well, I'm a loser and I'm just going to get what I can. You should be standing back, doing the same process, looking around, looking inside yourself, asking what's out there, and dreaming dreams. Just because you're a loser doesn't mean you can't dream for your second career.
Yeah. Carol, listening to these stories, is there anything we can learn from this, or are these such idiosyncratic stories that you do think there's something I can learn?
Oh, there's something that
What?
we can all, and a message that we need to let everybody know about, which is when you have the passion for something and when you see a need for something, and Richard Bowles, who wrote What Color Is Your Parachute, always talks about the intersection of a job is when you take who you are and what you love and find the need out there. That intersection is the job, and that's what you both did. And so often what people do too is what I heard in both of you is our heads can get in the way. Where we think we can't do this, or we think that this next step is not our next step, but somebody else's next step. Because usually the things that we're really, really good at and that come so naturally are things that we discount because we think, oh, that's so easy, anybody could do it. But that's not true. We each have our unique combinations of skills and talents.
And what I hear you saying also is pragmatically, there's a better chance for success, even financial success, at something we really care about than something we think we should care about.
That's right. Absolutely, no doubt about it.
And I guess we should say that the Purpose Prize and this program are both partially sponsored by Atlantic Philanthropies. So we're all cousins here. Thanks for joining us on Life Part 2. Speaking of inspirations, I was mesmerized listening to Sarah Lawrence Lightfoot. That's what a brilliant teacher can do. She's a professor at the Harvard Graduate School of Education and a MacArthur Fellow, a winner of the so-called Genius Grant. We met to discuss her latest book, The Third Chapter, Passion, Risk, and Adventure in the 25 Years After 50. Well, Dr. Sarah Lawrence Lightfoot, welcome to Life Part 2. What is the third chapter?
The third chapter is that developmental period after young adulthood, middle age, and then the third chapter. And I'm speaking about people from 50 years old to 75 years old, and I'm interested in that 25-year span. It's a time when demographers are now telling us that this is the new developmental period of our time. Last century, we discovered adolescence. It became an imprint in all of our cultural institutions, families and schools and communities. And this century, this is going to be the new developmental period, this third chapter.
One of the things that struck me is that terror and exhilaration, which you talk about, the leap of faith. I remember leaving the New York Times, where I spent most of my professional career, and the sense of liberation, but on the other hand, the idea that I had lost my last name of the New York Times. No one would return my phone calls, and I was kind of adrift. People feel that way.
Absolutely. So there's this loss of, at least it feels like, loss of the old rhythms, loss of the familiarity, often loss of resources, loss of status, loss of a handle that you can take with you to the next cocktail party when people say, "What do you do?" And all of that sort of external stuff, all the costuming that we wear and have worn for decades, suddenly is off. And there we are left with something that we don't quite know about yet.
If up until 50, you had been leading what you felt was useful, fulfilling, worthwhile life, what's happening now? Is there some sort of evolutionary or biological imperative at work?
Well, I think every time you do something over and over and over again, the habit which may have felt comfortable and comforting, right, and the stability of all that begins to feel like a rut, right?
Right.
And it begins to feel routine, and it begins to feel claustrophobic, all of those things. I think what happens is those things which energized us earlier, which were sources of challenge, which were where we put our ambitions, begin to not feel that way anymore, and we need to take on new challenges. We need to seize the opportunity to take on new adventures.
Yeah, and it's different for men and women.
Well, I think it's true that this is a time when women and men become more alike rather than less alike. I think often many of the men I talked to in this book were wanting a life that was more relational, where there was more intimacy. And women often said the opposite. They wanted to take on the world. They wanted to take on the challenge. And one metaphor, lovely metaphor, of one man I was talking to who was in the financial world guy, who said, I'm in my canoe and I'm coming into shore. And as I'm coming into shore, I see my wife and she's in another canoe and she's heading out to sea.
That image really struck me, and I loved the moment when their canoes were parallel.
Yes.
But then I had the idea that they kind of went on. This must be another interesting strain on our relationship.
Well, this is about negotiating new domains, that's for sure. It's also, I think, one of the things I talk about is that it's much easier to take this leap of faith, to move into the third chapter, if you have a relationship where someone values your new experience, recognizes that this is sending you, and therefore they think you're going to become a more interesting person to them if you do this.
Yeah. In this third chapter,
Yes.
when you are, you're very often a learner, an apprentice, not a mentor anymore. You've lost, your seeming powers, and you're going to get beat up. You're going to get rejected. You're going to make mistakes. Is this easier or harder at 60 than at 20?
I think it's easier. I think there is a way in which what we learn to do over time is learn to fail and learn from failure. We also have, if we're lucky, we begin to develop an even better sense of humor about the ways in which we're vulnerable, in which we're falling on our face, where we don't know where we're going. So humor helps a lot here. But I think that there is a kind of a humility and a modesty that comes with sort of a deep self-confidence, if we're lucky, that we don't have to achieve in a minute.
Yeah.
We don't have to show off. We can really be content with a kind of private kind of vigilance and self-acceptance and understanding that doesn't require a public affirmation.
If we're not as lucky and as self-confident as you and some of your case histories are, there is also a sense, and I've seen this in third chapteries.
Yes.
The sense of frustration of, hey, I've paid my dues.
Yeah.
I've been paying them for 40 years, and now all of a sudden, I'm not being treated with respect or dignity. I'm being treated as, another person starting out.
Right.
I can't take that.
Right. No, that's very hard, and there are people who talk about that rage and talk about that sense of being furious at the ways in which they're not treated with respect. And my book before was on respect. It has a lot to do with the way this culture regards aging, and we're still in this very ambiguous, ambivalent place around this. I mean, it's clear that there are signs that older adults are seen as stronger and wiser and even sexier than they used to be. But it's true as well that this culture is preoccupied with youth and thinks of youth as a much better place to be.
Let me stop you. Do you think that's really true? I mean, a lot of that sounds, with all respect, as kind of boomer marketing,
Well, I've had a number of deep conversations with people over the last 3 years. And there is always, I admit, there is always this sense that we need to be responsible for making ourselves feel good. We need to begin to think of ourselves as sexy, even if other people don't. We need to value our wisdom and convince others. In other words, there's a way in which we have some responsibility for changing the distortions of our culture and where we can be valued human beings.
Well, I look forward to your coming back with the fourth chapter. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome.
Life Part 2. Harold Evans, or Sir Harry, as he's called in England, where he was recently knighted by the Queen, is one of the great editors of his generation. He's married to another great editor, Tina Brown. After running the Times of London, Sir Harry came to America, where he served as president and publisher of Random House, and later vice chairman of U.S. News and World Report. Harry Evans is more than 80 years old. How does he stay so young and vital? Well, it's Sir Harry's serve.
Two obsessive pastimes of early youth have stayed with me all my life: chess and table tennis. I counted on chess to keep me alert and sharp, but table tennis is better, much better for mental acuity and better for having the aggression overt. I was good enough at 19, bragging now, to compete in the Premium English Open Table Tennis Championships, the Wimbledon of the sport. The following year, 1949, I was in the Royal Air Force and I wasn't present to see the triumph of another 19-year-old kid, Marty Reisman, a cheeky American from the Lower East Side of New York. He was so thin and lethal with a ferocious forehand drive, he was called the Needle. I didn't meet the Needle until 40 years later. I came across him in New York, a chance encounter that led to our playing regularly on a table I installed in the basement of my apartment. Neither of us guessed that whacking the little celluloid ball would prove to be therapy of high order. It seems we have stumbled on an extraordinary way to keep brain circuitries humming as happily as if we were 16 again. In the Japan Medical Journal, 2 neurologists report dramatic improvements in brain damaged patients encouraged to play even the most elementary ping pong. Clinical success showed clearly after 2.5 months. Patients needing wheelchairs decreased from 18 to just 6. The doctors give several underlying reasons for the progress. Eyes were constantly in motion, tracking the ball, and the repetition of reflex movements enhanced physical balance and rhythms. Now, perhaps if I played even more ping pong, I could go back to the chessboard and escape too many defeats.
I knew there was a reason I loved playing ping pong. It's good for my brain. Sir Harry, consider this a challenge. For now, that's it for Life Part 2. Thanks for joining us. I'm Robert Lipsyte. See you next time, older and better.
Are you ready for Life Part 2? Find information, inspiration,
All I can tell you is getting old is not for sissies.
and insight on life after 50 on pbs.org.
Thank you.
Major funding for Life Part 2 was provided by the Atlantic Philanthropies, engaging many to improve the lives of and achieve health and economic security for older adults. And by MetLife Foundation, celebrating the wisdom, talent, and experience of older adults. MetLife Foundation proudly supports Life Part 2.